I was 23 years old when I learned that a trap is built the way a cabinet is built, and by the same sort of hands. "Write it down, Sabine," said the Queen Consort. "All of it. I want it neat." The room had no windows. They called it the Ivory Cabinet because of the paneling, pale, close-grained, carved 100 years ago by a man whose name nobody bothered to keep, and it sat behind the Queen Consort's dressing rooms like a held breath. 2 lamps. 1 table. Morwenna stood, because she always stood when she was deciding something, and she was deciding something now. I had my copybook open and my pen ready. I was a junior secretary of the Queen Consort's household, which meant I wrote what I was told to write in a fair round hand, and I did not ask. 3 tests, she said. A man is not proved by 1. Lord Garrow-Fen, her steward, sat across from me with his fingers laced over his waistcoat. He was a heavy, comfortable man who had never in his life carried anything heavier than a grudge. 3, madam. The first is coin, she turned. Every man has a price and most of them have a small one. Not a fortune insults them, it makes them frightened. Enough to matter and not enough to alarm, 200 crowns. I wrote the first is coin, 200 crowns. The second is the order. She was pleased with this one, I could hear it. Coin only proves he is poor. An order proves he is asterisk or is asterisk. Give him a command that is lawful in its shape and unlawful in its bones, and see whether he thinks. A good servant does not think, Sabine. A good servant asterisk obeys. If he asks by whose authority, she made a small gesture, the gesture of dropping something over a rail, then he is a problem, and we will have discovered it cheaply. I wrote that too. My hand did not shake. I have thought about that a great deal since. "And the third, madam," said Fen. Morwenna was quiet for the space of 3 breaths. "The third is the snare," she said. "If he takes the coin, we own him. If he takes the order, we own him. And if he takes neither," she smiled at the pale paneling, "then we make certain the palace believes he took something." I stopped writing. She noticed everything. It was the only part of her that resembled a virtue. "Is your pen dry, child?" "No, madam." "Then use it." I used it. God forgive me, I used it. I wrote the third test out in my fair round hand, and ruled a line beneath it, and blotted it, and closed the copybook, and carried it out of that windowless room under my arm as if it were laundry. His name was Thomas Rennick, guardsman, 3rd Company of the Household Guard, 4 years at the Palace of Harrogate, 28 years old, unmarried, from the fairylands in the wet west of Eldermoor, where the rivers run brown, and the men who work the locks are paid in copper. I had seen him perhaps 40 times without ever once seeing him, in the way you see a doorframe 40 times a day. He stood the Queen's stair, the narrow flight of gray stone that runs from the household offices up to the private apartments, the stair that everybody uses and nobody looks at. A guardsman on the Queen's stair is furniture. That is the whole point of him. He was not a large man. The bearskin makes them all giants and the red wool makes them all the same, and underneath it Thomas Rennick was a lean, weather-scoured, ordinary-looking man with a jaw like a plowshare and eyes that went straight past you to the far end of the corridor, where trouble comes from. Why him? It is such a small thing that it makes me tired to write it. 6 weeks before the Ivory Cabinet, on a wet evening in the month of Rushing, a carter had come up to the gate of the ledger with a covered dray and no docket. The Queen Consort's own carter. The Queen Consort's own goods, going out of the palace and no docket, and the man on the gate that night was Guardsman Rennick. He turned the dray around. It took 4 minutes. There was no shouting. He asked for the docket. There was no docket, he said. Then it does not go out tonight, and I am sorry for your horses. And he wrote it in the gate book, which lives chained to the pillar inside the gatehouse. Dray covered 4 crates, turned back for want of a docket. 652. 11 words in a time. That was the whole of Thomas Rennick's crime. She sent for the docket the next morning and had it in 10 minutes, of course. And the dray went out on the Tuesday, and nobody thought about it again except her. Because she had been made to wait by a man in a red coat paid 11 crowns a month who had not so much as raised his voice at her carter. And because, somewhere in that neat and dangerous mind, she had understood something I would not understand for months. If the man on the door will not move for you when it is nothing, he will not move for you when it is everything. She meant to buy him first, and she was quite certain that she could, because she had bought a great many people and had never yet met one who did not, in the end, name a figure. Begin with Fen, she told me on the morning the first test was set. Fen is safe. Fen is fat and stupid, and a guardsman will believe a fat, stupid steward before he believes anything else in this building. Yes, madam. And Sabine, she was at her glass and she did not turn. You will keep the record, every offer, every answer, the day and the hour in your own hand. You want it written down. I want it written down, she said. When I am finished with this man, there will be a file on him 3 fingers thick, and every page of it will say that he was disobedient and insolent and unfit to stand at a door in this house. Files are how you kill a man in a palace, child, not knives. Files. I said, yes, madam, and I went away and I sharpened my pens. Notice the exact shape of that. It is the whole story, and it comes right at the beginning like a nail sticking out of a plank. She ordered the record kept. The first test came on the 14th day of Frost Month, at 20 minutes to noon, at the foot of the Queen's stair. I was there. She made me be there at the turn of the corridor with a bundle of household lists in my arms, the most invisible thing a person can look like in that building. I had my copybook in the middle of the lists and my pen up my sleeve like a card sharp. Lord Garrow-Fen came down the corridor with his comfortable rolling walk, and stopped in front of the guardsman on the stair, and he did it beautifully. He did not lower his voice. Lowering your voice is what a guilty man does. He spoke in the round, warm, tedious tone of a steward discussing carpets. Guardsman, a word. Rennick's eyes did not come down from the far end of the corridor. Sir. The gate book, said Fen, down at the ledger. There's a name in it from the month of rushing that oughtn't to be there. A clerical business. It would be a kindness if the page were corrected. Nothing moved in the guardsman's face. I had never watched a man's face so closely in my life, and there was simply nothing there to watch. It was like looking at the side of a house. I'm not a clerk, sir, Rennick said. No, but you keep the book on your watch, and a book kept by a man may be amended by that man, and no one is troubled. Fen's hand went inside his coat. It came out with a purse. He did not conceal it. That is what I mean about doing it beautifully. He held it in his palm at the level of his own chest, brown leather, plump as a pigeon. 200 crowns, said Fen. 200 crowns was 18 months of that man's pay. For the trouble of a pen stroke, Fen said, and for the Queen Consort's good opinion, which is worth rather more than the purse, if you have the wit to want it. Guardsman Thomas Rennick looked at the purse. He looked at it for about 2 seconds. He looked at it the way a man looks at whether he must walk through. And then his eyes went back up the corridor to the far end to where trouble comes from. No, sir, he said. That was all, not a speech. Not a word about honor, not one syllable about the crown or the oath or his mother's grave. Just no, sir, in the same flat, courteous, absolutely final tone in which he might have told a visitor that the West Gallery was closed. Fen's smile did not move, but something behind it did. Considerate man. I have, sir. You have not. You have refused it, which is a different thing. Nobody refuses 200 crowns in 2 seconds unless he has already decided, and thinking is above your station. Fen leaned in a little. I am told you have a sister in the laundry. I do, sir. Then think of asterisk her asterisk for 2 seconds. And there, and I saw it, 12 feet away with my lists. something did move in the guardsman's face. A tightening at the corner of the eye, the sort you would miss if you were not a frightened girl who had been ordered to write everything down. "I have, sir," Rennick said. "The answer is no." Fenn stood there. He had come with a purse and a plan and 40 years of knowing exactly how men behaved, and he stood in that corridor with the purse still open in his hand like a fool holding out bread to a bird that has flown, and after a moment he put it away and said, "You will regret this," which is what men say when they have nothing. Then he walked off. And Guardsman Rennick did the thing that saved him. Nobody knew it then, least of all him. He waited until the corridor was clear. He turned his head very slightly and said to the empty air, "Miss, if you be kind enough to fetch Sergeant Balt." I nearly dropped the lists. He had known I was there the entire time. Of course he had. It was his corridor. He could have told you how many people were standing in it with his eyes shut, and it had not changed his answer by one letter. I fetched Sergeant Balt. And Guardsman Rennick, with the sergeant standing over him and the chained book open on its shelf, wrote in the day book of the 3rd Company. Offer of coin made to me at the foot of the Queen's stair, 1140, by a gentleman of the Queen Consort's household. 200 crowns for the amendment of an entry in the gate book at the ledger. Refused. T. Rennick, GDSM, 3rd Coy. Sergeant Balt read it. Balt was a gray ruin of a man with a bad hip and 31 years' service, and he read it twice, and then looked at Rennick with an expression I could not read at all. "You know what you've done, lad." "I've written it down, Sergeant." Balt scratched his jaw. "You've written it down." He signed under it. And then, because the standing orders require it, because of an ordinance 200 years old that nobody in that palace had thought about in a generation, he made a fair copy and sealed it and sent it up to the keeper of the signet to be filed in the ledger they call the dead book. I have the ordinance by heart now. I have had cause to. Where any guardsman of the household refuses an order, an inducement, or a request touching his duty, he shall record the same with the day and the hour, and the record shall be copied to the keeper of the signet, that the crown may know how its servants are pressed, and by whom. 200 years old, written after some forgotten scandal in some forgotten reign, and kept the way old things are kept in old houses, dutifully, uncomprehendingly, because it was in the book and the book was in the shelf. The dead book. Nobody had read it in 50 years. The Queen Consort wanted a file 3 fingers thick. She was going to get one. I reported the refusal that evening in the Ivory Cabinet. She took it better than I expected, which frightened me more than shouting would have. She stood by the paneling with her hands behind her back and she said, 2 seconds. "About that, madam." He looked at it, though. He looked at it, madam. "Good," she said. "Then he is not a saint, he is only a stubborn man, and stubborn men are cheap asterisk." She turned. "Write the order, Sabine." I wrote the order. That is the sentence I have said in every one of those 9 courts, and every time the room goes very quiet, and everybody looks at me, and I look back, because I am not going to be spared. By the hand of the king's household, and under the household seal, the guard of the Queen's stair is commanded to admit the bearer and such persons as accompany him, between the 11th and 1st hours of the night of the 20th of Frost month, and to make no entry of the same in the gate book, the said passage being a private matter of the king's peace. It is a beautiful piece of work, and I am ashamed of how good it is. Every word of it is nearly true. There is asterisk a household seal, and the Queen Consort had lawful use of it, and it went on that paper with her own hand and no forgery whatsoever. Their asterisk are private matters of the king's peace. A man who could read but not asterisk think asterisk would have obeyed it and gone to his bed, never knowing what he had led up that stair. What it did not have, what it could not have, because the 2 men who would have had to sign it never would, was the countersignature of the captain of the watch and the tally mark of the clerk of the signet. An order to a guardsman on his post, touching the admission of persons to the private apartments, is not an order until those two marks are on it. It is the law of the household, and the reason is 400 years old and written in blood, because the private apartments are where the king sleeps. I wrote it, I blotted it, I watched her set the seal in the wax. And on the night of the 20th of Frost month, at 7 minutes past 11, she carried it down to the foot of the Queen's stair herself. She had not intended to. Fen was to have carried it. But somewhere in those 6 days, the thing had stopped being a test and started being a asterisk contest, and she wanted to be there when she won it. I went with her because she took me. 2 footmen came, and Fen, and behind Fen 3 gentlemen of her household whom I did not know and whose faces I did not like, and they carried a long case between them of the kind that holds a rolled carpet or a rolled anything. The Queen's stair at that hour is the coldest place in Harrogate. The lamps are turned low, the grey stone gives back nothing. Guardsman Rennick stood at the foot of it exactly as he had 6 days before, and I do not believe the man had ever in his life been surprised by anything. She put the paper into his hand. "You may read," she said, "or you may not. It is one to me." He read it, he took his time, she let him because she was enjoying herself. I watched his eyes go where mine had gone when I first wrote it, to the empty place at the foot, the clean white place where 2 marks were not. He folded the paper along its own crease. He held it out to her. "I can't act on this, madam." The corridor went so still, I could hear the lamp oil. "You can't asterisk," she said. "No, madam. It's not countersigned. The captain of the watch hasn't put his hand to it and the clerk of the signet hasn't tallied it. Without those, it's not an order. It's a letter. It bears the household seal." "It does, madam." "It bears my asterisk hand." "It does, madam." "Then say plainly what you are telling me, guardsman, and be careful, because I will remember the words. And Tomas Rennick, 11 crowns a month, 4 years at the door, a lockman's son from a wet town where the rivers run brown, said the words that they have carved into the lintel of the guardroom at Harrogate, and which nobody at the time thought were anything at all except the plain answer of a plain man to an impossible question. "You are the king's wife, madam. I am the crown's man. They are not the same door." Nobody breathed. "Take it back," she said. Her voice had gone down to nothing. "Take it back and open the stair, and I will forget you said it." "No, madam." "Open the stair." "No, madam." "I am your asterisk queen asterisk." "You are the Queen Consort," he said, "and I would die on this step for you tonight if a man came at you out of that dark, and I'd not think about it, and that is the truth. But I'll not open the king's stair at 11 at night to a paper that 2 men have refused to sign for anyone alive. Not for you, madam. Not for the crown prince. Not for the king himself if he sent it up this way, and he would not, madam, because he knows the law better than I do, and it was his own grandfather's father who made it." She hit him. "I have never told anyone this part." She struck him across the face with the flat of her hand, hard enough that the sound of it went up the Queen's stair and came back down, and one of the footmen made a small noise like a man stepping into cold water. Rennick did not move, not a step, not an inch. There was a mark on his cheek, and it stayed there, and he stood in front of it as though the mark had been issued to him with his kit. "Your name," she said, breathing hard. "Give me your name." "Rennick, madam. Tomas, 3rd Company. It's written on the board at the head of the stair, and it's been written there for 4 years. "Then it will come off the board," she said, and she turned, and her people gathered up their long case and went, and I went with them, and at the turn of the corridor I looked back once. He was standing at the foot of the stair with the mark of her hand on his face and his eyes on the far end of the corridor, where trouble comes from. He waited an hour, because his relief did not come until midnight, and a man does not leave his post. Then he went to the guardroom and wrote it down. Order presented to me at the foot of the Queen's stair, 1107 under the household seal, requiring the admission of unnamed persons to the private apartments between the 11th and 1st hours, and requiring that no entry be made, not countersigned by the captain of the watch, not tallied by the clerk of the signet, refused for want of authority, and the paper returned to the hand that gave it, struck once across the face. I did not move and I did not answer it. No persons were admitted. T. Rennick GDSM, 3rd Coy. Fair copy sealed and sent up to the keeper of the signet, filed in the dead book on a shelf in a room where a lamp was lit twice a year. 2. I have wondered since what was in the long case. The 3 gentlemen were never identified. The court of the household asked her twice. She said it was a gift for the king, and that the king had been asleep, and that the whole business was a wife's small kindness turned by a jumped-up doorman into a public scandal. She has never once said what was in the case. But I wrote the order, and it said the bearer and such persons as accompany him, and it said make no entry, and I know which door is at the top of the Queen's stair, and I know that King Alaric was ill that winter, the long gray illness that made him sleep like a stone from 10 at night till 8 in the morning, 3 floors up, in a room with 1 door. That is all I know. I have never allowed myself to guess, because a guess written down becomes a fact in about 9 years, and I have done enough of that sort of harm. Guardsman Tomas Rennick refused an unlawful order because it was unlawful. He did not know what was in the case. He did not need to know. That is the entire point of the law he was standing on. A man on a door does not have to be clever or lucky or informed. He only has to be unmoved. She began the next morning. She did not have him dismissed. That told me how carefully she was going to do this. A dismissal is loud. A dismissal makes a man into a story. Instead she went at him, the way water goes at a wall. The board at the head of the Queen's stair was changed on the 21st. Guardsman Rennick was posted to the Winter Arch, a stone tunnel on the north face of the palace where the wind comes off the moor and stands in your bones, and where the household guard puts men it is punishing without saying so. 2-hour turns there in frost month are a hardship. He was given 4-hour turns. His leave was stopped. There was a form for it, and the form was correct. The captain of the watch, a lean, exact, unbendable woman named Murren Vosk, who had commanded guardsmen for 19 years and had never once been observed to smile at anything, asked the master of the household why one of her men had been reposted without her hand on it, and was told courteously that it was a matter of household discipline and no concern of the watch. Captain Vosk said, "Everything that happens to my guardsmen is a concern of the watch." She was told that her diligence was noted. And on the 24th of frost month, a laundry maid of the palace named Nell Rennick, 17 years old, was dismissed without a character for the theft of a lace collar found in her basket. I wrote the dismissal in my fair round hand. I took it to the mistress of the linen, who had known that girl for 2 years, and she looked at me the way you look at something that has crawled out of a drain, and signed it, because she had a place and a pension and a mother in the country. Nell Rennick went out through the gate of the ledger at 4 in the afternoon of the long night with a cloth bag and no character. No other house in the realm would take her. A girl dismissed for theft from a royal palace is finished at 17. Her brother was on the Winter Arch, 4-hour turn. He could not leave his post. She stood in the arch of the ledger gate in the sleet for a moment, looking back at the building. I watched her from a window on the 2nd floor, because I am a coward and cowards watch from windows. Then she pulled her hood up and walked out into the town. And here is where people always expect the story to break, and where it instead becomes what it is. Guardsman Rennick did not go to the Queen Consort. He did not go to Fen. He did not go to the master of the household with his hat in his hands and offer, quietly, to be sensible. He came off the winter arch at 8 that night with his hands so cold he had to be helped out of his gloves, and he went to the guardroom, and Sergeant Balt says he sat at the shelf where the daybook is chained a long time before he could hold a pen at all. And then he wrote it down. My sister Nell Rennick, laundrymaid, was dismissed this day without a character for theft. I say she is no thief. I say the collar was put in her basket. I make no accusation against any person by name, having no proof, and I ask no favor. I set it down only that it is on the record with the date, being the fourth thing done to me or mine since I refused the offer of coin on the 14th and the order on the 20th. T. Rennick, GDSM, 3rd Coy. Balt read it and knew what it was. A man putting his own head into a noose in his own handwriting, in the vain and stubborn hope that the noose would one day be evidence. Lad, he said, this will not help her. No, Sergeant. It will finish you. Likely, Sergeant. Then why? And Rennick, this is Balt's account, given on oath, said, because if I don't write it, it didn't happen, and if it didn't happen, they can do it to the next one. Balt signed under it. Fair copy seal. Up to the keeper of the signet, into the dead book. 3. There is a thing I have to tell you now about Tomas Rennick, and it is the only piece of him I ever got that was not written in a ledger. I got it from a man in the Fairylands, in the spring after all of this was over, when I had no place and no character of my own, and I went west because I could not stay east. The lockmen on the ferry canals are paid in copper and trusted with everything. Every barge pays its toll at the lock, and the lockman takes the money and writes the barge in the book, and there has never been a system more perfectly designed for a poor man to steal from. Tomas Rennick's father was a lockman at Coldharrow for 19 years. In the winter of the flood, a wool factor offered him 11 crowns to write a barge into the book as having come through empty. Just once. The barge was carrying untaxed fleece, and the factor was a smiling man with a warm coat. He took the 11 crowns. He took them because his wife was ill and there was no fire in the house, and the doctor at Coldharrow would not come up the towpath for less than 9, and he wrote *empty in the book, and the doctor came, and his wife lived. She was Tomas Rennick's mother, and she lived another 20 years because of 11 stolen crowns. And in the spring the book was audited, and Rennick's father was dismissed without a character, and he never again in the remaining 18 years of his life held any employment better than casual labor, and the town never let it go. A lockman who took money, in a place where the whole economy of 2 counties rests on the honesty of 30 men in wet coats and nobody watching them. Tomas Rennick was 9 years old when his father was dismissed, and he was old enough to hear what the town said, and to see what it did to a man to be a byword. And he was old enough later to work out the arithmetic that his father never could. That 11 crowns had bought his mother's life and cost his father his name, and that there is no ledger in the world in which those 2 entries balance, and that a man is best advised to never once in his life find out what his price is. He'd have taken it, you know, the man in the Fairylands told me over his drink. For the mother, any man would. He shook his head slowly. That's why the lad won't take anything. It's not that he's better than his father, it's that he knows he isn't. I have thought about that sentence for a very long time. I was still thinking about it when Morwenna, in the Ivory Cabinet, on the 3rd day of the new year, put her hand flat on my copybook and said, "He is not going to break, set the snare." The snare had 2 jaws, and I only ever saw one of them being made, which is how a person of my sort survives long enough to write anything down. The first jaw was a gift. If it had been dressed as a bribe, it would have been nothing. So the 3rd test did not look like a bribe. It looked like kindness, and it came from the last direction on earth that a man in his position would have thought to fear. On the 9th of Wolfmonth, a letter came to the guardroom of the 3rd Company for Guardsman T. Rennick. The hand was a woman's. The paper was cheap. It said, in substance, that the writer had heard of his sister's dismissal, that she believed the girl was no thief, that she was in a position to be of small help and wished to be, that she had no name to give and would give none, having a place of her own to lose. Enclosed was a note of hand on a merchant house in the town, payable to bearer, 40 crowns, and a small object wrapped in a twist of gray flannel. The object was a brooch. It was blue, a single dark sapphire cut in the old cushion style, in a setting of small pearls gone slightly yellow with age, on a pin of soft gold. If you had found it in a market stall, you would have paid perhaps 3 crowns for it, and you would have been the greatest fool in the history of commerce. It was the ferrywaiter brooch. It had belonged to the late Queen Isolde. She had worn it at her betrothal, in the portrait that hangs in the long gallery, and she had left it to her children. It was numbered in the inventory of the late Queen's personal jewels as item 41, kept in the jewel office under 2 locks, and it had not been out of that room in 11 years. And here is the beauty of it. Do not make the mistake of thinking she was a stupid woman. He would not have known. Nobody would have known. The portrait in the long gallery is 9 feet up, and the brooch in it is the size of a thumbnail. A guardsman does not read the inventory of the late Queen's personal jewels. He would have looked at a plain blue brooch from an anonymous kind woman below stairs, and a draft for 40 crowns, and he would have thought, somebody is trying to help my sister, and they cannot even sign their name. And then he would have kept it, or sold it, or sent it out to Nell in the town, and it would have surfaced in a pawnshop in a fortnight, and the whole of Harrogate would have learned that the incorruptible guardsman of the Queen's stair had been quietly stripping the dead Queen's jewel case all along. That is not a bribe. That is an execution with a delay on it. I wrote the letter. Morwenna dictated it standing at the paneling, and she made me do it 3 times, and the 3rd time she said, "Better, make it more frightened." She has a place to lose, and I made the woman who did not exist more frightened, and I sanded it and folded it and gave it to Fen. The second jaw I did not see. It was said at some hour of some night by some person whose name has never been established to the satisfaction of any court. Here is what is known asterisk. The ferrywaiter brooch was signed out of the jewel office on the 11th of Wolfmonth, at 10 in the morning, on a chit bearing the household seal and the signature of Lord Garrofen, for cleaning. It was never returned. The letter reached Guardsman Rennick's hand at 2:20 on the afternoon of the 14th of Wolfmonth. He was off duty, in the guardroom of the 3rd Company with 11 other men, mending a strap. I was not there, but I have read the statement so many times that I can see it as if I had been standing at the door. He opened the letter. He read it twice. Guardsman Pike, in his statement, says he watched Rennick read it twice and go very still, and that he thought at first the man had had bad news. Then he unwrapped the flannel and looked at the brooch in his palm. And Guardsman Thomas Rennick stood up, in a guardroom full of men, and he said, out loud in a flat voice, "Sergeant, I've been sent money and a jewel by a person who won't give a name." He did not know, that is the thing. As far as Thomas Rennick knew, he was holding an anonymous kindness from a poor woman below stairs who pitied his sister, the first kind thing that had come to his family since the long night, and the forgivable thing to do, the thing that 99 men in 100 would have done without one flicker of shame, was to put it in his coat and say nothing. He put it on the table and called the sergeant. Balt came over. Balt looked at the brooch for about 4 seconds in Balt's face, and every man in that room described this the same way, went the color of tallow. Because Sergeant Odo Balt had 31 years in the household guard, and had stood on the door of the long gallery for 6 of them, and had looked at that portrait 9 feet up perhaps 40,000 times. "Don't touch it," said Balt. "Nobody touch it. Pike, go and get the captain of the watch and run." Captain Murren Vosk was in the guardroom in 11 minutes. She did 4 things, and every one of them was correct, and if she had done any one of them differently, Tomas Rennick would have been hanged. She had the brooch, the flannel, the letter, and the notes of hand placed on a clean cloth in the middle of the table, and posted 2 men at the guardroom door with orders that nothing was to leave the room, including her. She sent a runner not to the master of the household, and this was the thing that showed you 19 years, to the jewel office with a written question. Is item 40 one of the late Queen's personal inventory presently in your custody? Answer in writing. M. Was gebt. The answer came back in 20 minutes. Item 41 signed out 11th Wolf month for cleaning on the household seal by L.D. G. Finn, not returned. She folded it and put it in her breast pocket, and she said to Guardsman Rennick, "You will consider yourself under my hand from this moment, and you will not leave the barrack block without my order. Do you understand what has been done to you?" And Rennick, who by then had worked out at least half of it, said, "Yes, ma'am. I think somebody meant me to keep it." "Somebody meant you to hang for it," said Captain Vosk. "Keeping it was only the road." And then she did the third thing, and it is the reason I am writing this in a warm room and not from a cell. She said, "Your locker. There is a document. 1 page, dated the 14th day of Frost month, the day of the purse, the very evening of it, in that square, unlovely fence-post hand, countersigned by Sergeant O. Balt and stamped by the quartermaster. It reads, Request that my kit locker, number 19, 3rd Company Barrack Block, be sealed by the quartermaster this day, and that the seal be broken only in the presence of an officer of the watch and 1 other witness. Reason: I have this day been offered money by a gentleman of this household to falsify a record, and I have refused it, and I am given to understand I will regret it. I would sooner be able to prove what is mine and what is not. T. Rennick GDSM, 3rd Coy. The quartermaster of the 3rd Company was a bored man of 50 who had never in 11 years received such a request, and who granted it because it cost him nothing and it amused him. He put the company's wax on locker 19 that evening, and entered it in his book, in a column headed Seals Applied Asterisk, which had been empty since the year of his appointment. 2 months that seal sat there, in a barrack block full of men, on a locker nobody had any reason to look at. Captain Vosk walked the length of the barrack block with Sergeant Balt on one side and the quartermaster on the other and 11 guardsmen behind, and stopped in front of locker 19, and the seal was asterisk broken. Not tampered with cleverly, not lifted and replaced. Broken, and the door stood a quarter of an inch proud of its frame, the way a door does when a man in a hurry has shut it in the dark with his heart going. She said, "Note the day and the hour, note that I have not touched it. Sergeant, open it." Balt opened it. Inside, folded into the sleeve of Tomas Rennick's spare tunic, there were 4 more of the late Queen Isolde's jewels. Items 12, 19, 27, and 33 of the personal inventory, a ring, 2 pins, and a small chain of white gold, and a rolled canvas purse containing 160 crowns in coin. Then Captain Vosk said, in a voice like the closing of a book, "Guardsman Rennick, I arrest you on suspicion of theft from the household of the Crown." And Rennick said, "Ma'am," and put his hands behind his back, and that is how they took him out of the barrack block at 4:30 that afternoon in his shirt sleeves, in front of every man he served with. They cheered when he came out. 60 men of the 3rd Company standing in the wind in the barrack yard, and their comrade brought out under arrest for stealing a dead queen's jewels, and they cheered asterisk him. Not a joke, not a jeer. They stood and they shouted his name until the captain of the watch turned round and looked at them, and even then they did not stop, and she did not make them. Because every man in that yard had been in the guardroom, or had heard within the hour from a man who had, and every man in that yard knew that Tomas Rennick had stood up, in front of 11 witnesses, and called the sergeant over to a jewel nobody else had seen. Guilty men do not ever do that, and 60 guardsmen of the 3rd Company understood in about 90 seconds exactly what was being done to one of theirs, and by whom, and they cheered him out of the yard because it was the only thing they were permitted to do. That is what she never understood, from the first day in the Ivory Cabinet to the last morning of her life at Ravensmere. She thought the household guard was a wall. It was a asterisk body. It had a memory and a book and a stubborn old ordinance from a reign nobody could name, and it had 60 men in a cold yard who knew exactly what had been done to one of theirs, and not one of them could prove a thing. I was at the 2nd floor window again. Cowards watch from windows. Morwenna was at the window 1 floor above me. I know because I heard the sash go up, and I heard her listening to 60 men cheering a thief, and I heard the sash come down again, quite gently, the way you close a door on a room you have decided to burn. And then it went very badly, and it went badly fast, and for 11 days I truly believed that a good man was going to be destroyed by a machine that I had personally oiled. They put him in the cold room, the guardhouse cell under the North Range. Stone, 1 bench, 1 grating, a lamp in a box. The court of the household was convened for the 6th of Wind month. That is the king's own court for offenses committed within the household. It sits in the chamber of the green cloth, presided over by whichever member of the royal family holds the king's commission for it. And in that year, as in every year for 11 years, that was Princess Adela, King Alaric's sister, 61, with a face like a hatchet, who had never been observed to be interested in what anybody wished her to think. Between the arrest and the court there were 21 days. The following things happened. On the 3rd day, the gate book from the gate of the ledger, the book with 11 words in it about a covered dray turned back for want of a docket, was found to have 4 leaves cut out of it with a blade, the whole of the month of rushing gone. On the 5th day, Sergeant Odo Balt, 31 years' service, was retired on grounds of his hip, with a pension and a letter of thanks, and put on a coach to his daughter's house in the wool country. It was entirely lawful, and there was not one thing anybody could do about it. On the 7th day, Captain Murren Vosk was informed that, as the arresting officer, she had formed a view, and would appear as nothing but a witness of fact, and that the household's case would be presented by the master of the household's office, in whose service Lord Garrow Finn had, by a coincidence the court was invited to find unremarkable, been given a temporary appointment. And on the 9th day, at 9 at night, the Queen Consort went down to the cold room herself, and took me with her to write. She had him brought a chair. She noticed that he was cold and sent for a blanket, and when it came, she took it from the turnkey's hands and put it on the bench beside him rather than handing it to him, because she had thought about how to give a man a blanket without giving him anything. Then she sat down across from him in the lamplight, in that stone box, in a gown worth more than his father's whole life, and she was, I have to say it, because untruth here would be a kind of cheating, magnificent. "Guardsman Rennick," she said, "I am going to be honest with you. It will be the only honest conversation you have between now and the end of your life, so I recommend you listen to it." He said nothing. He had the blanket across his knees. He had not thanked her for it. "You are going to be convicted," she said. "Not because you are guilty. I know you are not guilty. I would be a fool to insult you with a pretense. You are going to be convicted because 5 jewels of the late Queen were found in a locker with your name on it, because you were sent a 6th by an anonymous hand and cannot produce the hand, because your sister was dismissed for theft 9 weeks ago, and because the gate book that might have shown some other picture has, most unfortunately, been damaged." She let that sit. "You have no witnesses of any weight. Your sergeant is in the wool country. Your captain has been made a witness of fact, and the case against you will be presented by a man who has known exactly what he intended to do to you since the 14th of Frost month." She tilted her head. "You are, in short, finished, and there is nothing whatever to be done about it." "Yes, madam," he said. That was all. "Yes, madam, as if she had told him the west gallery was closed. I saw her hand tighten on the arm of the chair. "Except," she said, "that there is." And then she made the offer, and I wrote it down in the words she used from my copybook, which the chamber of the green cloth still holds under seal. The jewels were taken by a person of this household. Everybody knows it. The only question is which asterisk. And the case against you and the case against another man would look almost precisely the same: 5 jewels, a locker, a hand on a chit, if the man who found them in his sleeve were to say, quite simply, that he had been told to hold them by someone he could not refuse, that he had done what a guardsman does, which is to obey. She leaned in a little. "The Crown Prince," she said, "has been a great deal in the jewel office this last year, cataloging his mother's things. He is 26 years old and he is in debt, which is a matter of record in the ledgers of 3 houses in the town. He has been seen on the Queen's stair at hours that are not his. And if a guardsman of the 3rd Company, a man with a reputation guardsman, a man who refused 200 crowns in the corridor in front of witnesses, if such a man were to say, with tears in his eyes, that he had been given a package by the Crown Prince of Eldermoor and told to keep it and ask nothing, then I do not think there is a court in this realm that would not believe him." She sat back. "Sign that," she said, "and here is what follows. You walk out of this room tonight. Your sister is restored to the laundry with her character and a year's back wages. You are made sergeant of the Queen's stair, and after a decent interval, an officer. Your mother's grave gets a stone, and your family stops being what your family has been since you were 9 years old." And then she said the thing I have never been able to get out of my head, and that I have come to think is the truest sentence she ever spoke. "And you would not even be lying about the important part," she said gently. "You are innocent. Everything you would sign is true except the name. All I am asking you to do, Tomas, is put the right crime on the wrong man, and he is not a good man, and you know he is not, and the realm will be better governed without him." Silence in the cold room. The lamp in its box. I had my pen on the paper. The nib had gone dry while she was talking, and I had not dared to dip it. Guardsman Tomas Rennick said, "No, madam." 2 seconds. The same 2 seconds. The same flat, courteous, absolutely final voice in a stone cell from a man who had just been offered his sister's life back. Morwenna did not move. "You have not thought about it." "I have, madam." "You have not. Nobody thinks in 2 seconds." And he looked at her. The only time in this entire history that Tomas Rennick is recorded as having looked directly at the Queen Consort of Eldermoor, because a guardsman on a post looks at the far end of the corridor and not at the people in it, and he said, "I thought about it in frost month, madam. I've been thinking about it since I was 9 years old. It's a very old question in my family, and it has one answer, and I'm sorry, but I'm not going to get a different one tonight because the room is colder." She stood up. "You will hang." "Then I'll hang, madam." "For nothing, for a boy you have never spoken to." "For the Crown Prince, madam, whom I have never spoken to, and who has done me no wrong, and whom I will not have on my conscience along with everything else that's on it." He shifted the blanket off his knees and folded it squarely and set it on the end of the bench. "And I'll thank you to take your blanket, madam, because I find I don't want it." That was the Defiance, not the line at the foot of the stair, though they carved that one, and I do not grudge it. The Defiance was a man in a cell folding a blanket into a square and giving it back. She went out. I gathered up my things with hands that would not work and went after her, and at the door of the cold room she stopped, and without turning round said, "Every man has a price, Sabine." And I said, and I had never in my life contradicted her, not once, not by a syllable. "Not that one, madam." She did turn round then. She looked at me for perhaps 4 seconds, the way she had looked at the purse in Fenn's hand, the way you look at whether you must walk through. No, she said. Not that one. And she went up the stairs, and I stood in the passage outside the cold room with my copybook against my chest, and the whole enormous fraudulent machinery of my life came apart very quietly, all at once, like a wall that has been wet for years. Now I must tell the bad part, because the bad part is where most stories of this kind actually end, and the only reason this one did not is a dead clerk and a shelf. Guardsman Rennick was assigned an advocate. His was a decent, tired, competent man named Hollis Marrable, who had defended household servants in the chamber of the green cloth for 20 years, and had won perhaps a third of them, which is a very good record indeed. Marrable read the papers in 2 hours and went down to the cold room and told his client the truth. They will convict you, he said. I am not being pessimistic, I am being accurate. 5 jewels in your locker, a 6th in your hand, your sister on the record as a thief. I can put your character in the purse, the refusal, 60 men cheering in a yard, and it will move them, and it will not save you. The green cloth is 4 officers of the household and a princess, and they will look at those 5 jewels and they will not be able to see past them. Yes, sir. There is a road, said Marrable. And here it is. This is the false dawn, the reasonable, decent, sensible middle that nearly ate him, and it did not come from Morwenna, and that is exactly why it was so dangerous. It came from a good man who wanted to save his life. Plead the lesser, said Marrable, not theft. Concealment. You say, I found these things. I do not know how they came to my locker. Perhaps in the confusion of my sister's disgrace I did a foolish thing. I did not report them at once, and for that I am guilty, and I throw myself on the mercy of the court. He spread his hands. Concealment carries dismissal and a year. Theft from the crown carries the rope. They will accept it because they do not want to hang a guardsman with your record, Rennick. They want a way not to. Give them the way. It was an excellent piece of advice. If Tomas Rennick had taken it, he would have been alive, and out, and disgraced, and the Queen Consort would have had everything she wanted. Rennick asked one question. Sir, if I say I did a foolish thing, does that go in the book? Marrable did not understand. It goes in the record of the court, yes. So in 10 years, a man reads the book, and it says a guardsman of the 3rd Company had the late Queen's jewels in his locker and hid them and was sorry. Oh, yes. Then it says I took them, said Rennick. It says it slower is all, and the next man they come at with a purse, he reads that book, sir, because they all read the book. It's chained to the wall and there's nothing else to read on a wet Tuesday, and he sees that the last man who said no went down anyway and had to say sorry for a thing he never did. He shook his head once. I'll not write that for him, sir. I'd sooner hang and leave the page clean. Marrable, who gave this evidence himself and did not have to, said that he sat in the cold room for some minutes and did not trust himself to speak. Then he worked for 19 days without, as far as anyone could establish, sleeping properly once. He found nothing. That is the part people leave out when they tell this as a tale of the noble guardsman and the wicked queen. Marrable was good at this, and he tore that palace apart, and there was nothing to find. The gate book leaves were cut out and burned. The sergeant was in the wool country. The anonymous letter was in an unknown hand on paper sold in 9 shops. The chit for the ferrywaiter brooch was signed by a man who would swear on his mother that he had returned it, and locker 19 was a broken seal with nobody's name on the breaking. 5 days before the court sat, Marrable told Captain Vosk that he did not expect to save his client. Captain Vosk said, "Then we will have to be cleverer than we are." And Marrable said the thing that undid all of it, out of pure exhaustion in a corridor, at 11 at night, not as an idea but as a complaint. The man wrote everything down. 3 separate declarations, dated, witnessed, sealed, the purse, the order, his sister. It is the best paper trail I have ever seen a defendant lay, and every leaf of it is in the day book of the 3rd Company, and the daybook has been in the custody of the master of the household's office since the arrest, and when I ask for it I am told it is being copied." There was a silence in that corridor, and Captain Murren Vosk, who had come up through the household guard from a recruit of 17, and had learned the standing orders the way other people learn prayers, said very slowly, "Copied to where?" Marable stared at her. "The daybook is not the record," said Vosk. "The daybook is the first copy." She was already walking. "He shall record the same, and the record shall be copied to the keeper of the signet, that the crown may know how its servants are pressed, and by whom." She was going up the north stair 2 at a time in the dark with a lawyer stumbling behind her. "Ordinance of the 4th year of King Emeric. Nobody has cited it in living memory. Nobody has repealed it either, Marable, because nobody repeals anything in this building. They simply stop reading it." "Where does it go?" Marable was running now. "Vosk, where do the copies go?" And the captain of the watch said, "Into the dead book." The keeper of the signet in that year was a very old man called Peveril Crane, who had held the office for 34 years and was widely understood in the palace to be an ornament. He was not an ornament. Captain Vosk got him out of his bed at midnight and asked him, in plain words, whether the dead book was still kept. Master Crane put on his spectacles. "Of course the dead book is still kept," he said. "It is required by the ordinance." "Does anyone read it?" "No," said Crane. "Nobody has read it in my time. I have filed 406 entries into it in 34 years and have never once been asked for one, and I have often wondered why I bother, and now I find I am pleased that I did." He was already reaching for his coat. "How many entries do you want, Captain?" "3, said Vosk. "3rd Company, Guardsman T. Rennick, Frost Month." The old man stopped with one arm in his sleeve. "There are *4*, he said. "The chamber of the green cloth sat on the 6th of Windmonth at 10 in the morning. It is not a grand room. It is a long paneled chamber with a table under a green baize cloth and 11 chairs, and there is no gallery and no public. The court of the household sits in private. At the head of the table, Princess Adela, 61 years old, in gray, with the king's commission on the cloth in front of her. 4 assessors, the controller, the master of the robes, the keeper of the privy purse, and the judge advocate of the household guard. Along the left, the master of the household's office, presenting, which in practice meant Lord Garrow Fenn, in a very good coat, with a very thin case that did not need to be thick. Along the right, Holly's Marable, and behind him standing, because a defendant of the household guard stands, Guardsman Tomas Rennick of the 3rd Company, in his own red tunic, which they should not have let him wear, and I have always thought that some quiet person in that building bent a rule to let him wear it, and I hope that person had a long and happy life. And at the back of the chamber, on a plain chair by the door, having come in without announcement and told the ushers to carry on, Crown Prince Rowan, 26 years old, who had heard something. The Queen Consort was not present. She had no standing there. She was 3 floors up in the Ivory Cabinet, and I was supposed to be with her, and I was not. Fenn presented in 50 minutes, and he did it well, and it was terrible, because there was almost nothing to argue with. 5 jewels, item numbers read out one by one, a locker with a name on it, a 6th jewel found in the accused's own hand, a sister dismissed 9 weeks earlier for the theft of lace, a brother who had, since the beginning of Frost Month, shown a marked and unusual interest in the * records of the palace, writing declaration after declaration, said Fenn, building his story in advance, as a careful thief does, my lady, and I have never in my life seen a thief so careful. He sat down, the judge advocate wrote something, and Marable stood up and said, "My lady, I call the keeper of the signet." Master Peveril Crane came in with a leather box under his arm and was sworn, and Marable asked him to describe the ordinance of the 4th year of King Emeric, and he described it, and the judge advocate, the only man at that table who should have known it, and who went slowly white as it was read out, said, "Go on." "Item," said Crane, unfolding the first sealed sheet. "3rd Company Day Book, 14th of Frost Month. Offer of coin made to me at the foot of the Queen's Stair, 1140, by a gentleman of the Queen Consort's household. 200 crowns for the amendment of an entry in the gate book at the ledger. Refused." Fenn did not move. "Item, 20th of Frost Month. Order presented to me at the foot of the Queen's Stair, 1107, under the household seal, requiring the admission of unnamed persons to the private apartments, not countersigned, refused for want of authority, struck once across the face. I did not move, and I did not answer it." Somebody at the table put down a pen. "Item, 24th of Frost Month. My sister Nell Rennick, laundry maid, was dismissed this day without a character for theft. I say she is no thief. I say the collar was put in her basket." Crane looked up over his spectacles. "And item 4, my lady," he said, "which I file with some pleasure. 14th of Frost Month, the same day as the 1st, under the hand of the quartermaster of the 3rd Company. A request that the guardsman's own kit locker be sealed and opened only before witnesses. Reason: I have this day been offered money by a gentleman of this household to falsify a record, and I have refused it, and I am given to understand I will regret it. I would sooner be able to prove what is mine and what is not." He closed the box. "These 4 documents," said the keeper of the signet, "have been in my custody, under my seal, in a locked room since the middle of Frost Month. That is 2 months before the jewels were found. No person has had access to them. No person has ***, because no person in this palace, including, I regret to say, myself until Tuesday night, remembered that they existed." The silence in the chamber of the green cloth was not the silence of a shocked room. It was the silence of 11 people all doing the same arithmetic at the same time. Princess Adela said, in a voice like a nail going in, "Lord Fenn, you have told this court that the accused wrote declarations to build a story in advance." "My lady, he built it in Frost Month," said Adela, "before there was anything to build it about. Unless you are inviting me to find that a guardsman who intended to steal 5 jewels in Wolf Month prepared for it by refusing 200 crowns from you in Frost Month, in a public corridor, at 11:40 in the morning." Fenn said, "The offer of coin is not admitted, my lady." "No," said Adela, "I don't imagine it is." Marable did not sit down. "My lady, I call the quartermaster of the 3rd Company." The quartermaster produced his book. The column-headed seals applied had 1 line in it, dated the 14th of Frost Month. The column-headed seals broken by authority had no lines at all. Locker 19 had never been lawfully opened, and on the 14th of Wolf Month the seal was found broken and the door standing proud of its frame. "So the locker was opened," said the judge advocate, "by someone with no authority to open it." "Yes, sir." "Which could have been the accused himself." "It could, sir," said the quartermaster. "Except that he was the man who asked me to seal it, sir, and he stood there while I did it, and he checked the wax with his thumb before he went off." And then Marable called Captain Murren Vosk, and Captain Vosk laid on the green cloth 2 more books, and this was the end of it, though it took another 40 minutes for the room to understand that it was the end of it. The first book was the ledger of the Jewel Office. The annual verification of the late Queen's personal inventory had been carried out on the 2nd of Wolf Month, and items 12, 19, 27, and 33, a ring, 2 pins, a chain of white gold had been cited and initialed, and were, on that day, lying in their trays under 2 locks. 12 days later, they were folded into the sleeve of a spare tunic in a barrack block on the other side of the North Range. The second book was the key book of the 3rd Company barrack block, in which the quartermaster records every drawing of the locker room key. Between the 2nd of Wolf month and the 14th, the key had been drawn 11 times for routine purposes: kit issue, boot inspection, the ordinary business of 60 men, every one of them in daylight in company with 3 or 4 names against it. And once, at 1 o'clock in the morning of the 12th of Wolf month, for an inspection of quarters by direction of the master of the household's office, signed for by a clerk of that office, and returned 40 minutes later. 1 in the morning, said Princess Adela. Yes, my lady. An inspection of quarters at 1 o'clock in the morning. Yes, my lady. And where, said the princess, was guardsman Rennick at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 12th of Wolf month? Captain Vosk turned a page of the watchbook. He was on the winter arch, my lady, she said. Midnight to 4. A punishment turn, and it is not lawful, and I have said so in writing 4 times. He was in plain sight of the North Gate sentry and of Corporal Hale and of the lampman for the whole of it, and he was signed off at 4 and had to be helped out of his gloves. He could not have been within a quarter of a mile of that barrack block. She closed the watchbook. The only nights he could not possibly have gone near his own locker, said Captain Vosk, were the nights the Queen Consort's household had him standing in the wind, and they chose one of them. Nobody in that room said anything for some while. Princess Adela looked down the length of the green cloth at guardsman Tomas Rennick, who had stood at attention for 2 hours and 40 minutes without shifting his weight once, and who was looking, as he always looked, at the far end of the room. Guardsman, she said, is there anything you wish to say to this court? No, my lady. Nothing at all. It's all in the books, my lady, said Rennick. I wrote it down at the time. I'd only be saying it twice. And Princess Adela of Eldermoor, who had sat in that chamber for 11 years and had heard a great many servants of the crown explain themselves, put her hand flat on the green cloth and was, for a moment, unable to continue. It was the crown prince who broke it. He got up from his plain chair by the door and walked the whole length of the chamber, and every officer at that table began to rise, and he waved them down with an impatience that was not aimed at them. Aunt, he said, may I ask him something? You have no standing here, Rowan. No, said the crown prince, I'd like to ask him anyway. Adela looked at him a moment. Ask. And Rowan turned to the guardsman, young, his face doing something it did not know how to do, having sat at the back of that room since 10 in the morning listening to a very quiet man decline to save his own life at the cost of Rowan's, and he said, She offered you my name, didn't she? Marrable moved to object, and Adela lifted one finger, and Marrable did not object. Rennick's eyes came down off the far wall. Yes, sir, he said. On the 9th in the cell. Yes, sir. For your sister. For my sister, sir, and my freedom and a surging stripes and a stone on my mother's grave. Rennick's voice did not change at all. It was a very good offer, sir. I'd not want the court to think it was a poor one. It was the best offer anybody has ever made me. The crown prince stood there with nothing at all to say. Why, he said at last. And guardsman Tomas Rennick, 3rd Company, 11 crowns a month, said the second of the 2 things he is remembered for, in the tone of a man explaining a piece of kit. Because you're not the crown either, sir. You're a man who'll wear it. It's the wearing that's the job. He looked back at the far wall. If I'll break the law for the woman that has the king's ear, sir, then I'll break it for the man that has the king's blood, and then there's no law, sir, there's only whoever's nearest. And then what's the use of me? Any dog can stand at a door and let in whoever it likes best. Somebody at the green cloth, the controller, I think, made a sound that was not a word. And that was when I opened the door at the back of the chamber and came in with my copybook. I had been outside since 10:15, standing in the passage with the book against my chest, doing the sum that every coward does. If I go in, I lose everything, and if I do not go in, I lose only him. I do not want any credit for it. I went in because a man who had nothing left had just declined to sell a prince he had never met, and I had in my hands the plan of his destruction, dictated to me, in my own fair round hand, 3 tests, ruled and blotted and numbered. The usher tried to stop me. Princess Adela said, "Let her come." I walked the length of the chamber of the green cloth, and I put the copybook on the table in front of her, and I opened it to the 3rd of Frost month, and I said, "My lady, my name is Sabine Ori. I am a junior secretary of the Queen Consort's household. I wrote it all down, my lady. She told me to." They acquitted him at 4:20 in the afternoon. Princess Adela did not read a long judgment. She read 11 sentences, and the 11th was, "The court finds that no offense was committed by this man, and that a very great offense was committed against him in this house, by persons of this house, and this court will not rest until it has their names." Then she stood up, and every officer at the green cloth stood up, and Princess Adela of Eldermoor, 61, in gray, with a face like a hatchet, bowed to a guardsman of the 3rd Company across the length of the table. He did not know what to do. He had been standing at attention for 6.5 hours, and nobody had ever bowed to him in his life. What he did in the end was come to attention harder, which is the only thing a man like that has, and it was enough, and it was more than enough, and the judge advocate of the household guard wept openly and did not trouble to hide it. The rest took 11 weeks, and it was all paper, and it was merciless. Lord Garrow-Fen was arrested on the 8th of Wind month on the evidence of my copybook, the jewel office chit, and the key book, and he did what men of his kind always do at the end, which is talk. He talked for 4 days. Everything I have written here about the Ivory Cabinet, he confirmed in more detail than I could give, because he had been in that room from the beginning and I had only been the pen. He was stripped of every office, fined the whole value of his estate, and put out of the realm for life. He died some years later in a boarding house on a foreign coast, and I am told he complained to the last that he had been badly used. The 3 gentlemen with the long case were never found. That remains, and I have made my peace with it. The Queen Consort of Eldermoor was not tried. There is no court in the realm that can try her, and that is a defect in our law which the guardsman himself later pointed out in a sentence of 9 words that made a Lord Chancellor put his head in his hands. But the court of the household is the king's court, and the household is the king's, and on the 2nd of Greening, in the long gallery, under the portrait of the late Queen Isolde with the fairy-waiter brooch at her throat, King Alaric of Eldermoor, grey, thin, propped between his son and his sister. In the 1st month he had been able to stand for any length of time, signed the instrument that took his wife's household seal away from her. She was stripped of every office in the household. She was barred from the jewel office, the signet, the privy purse, the gates, the books, and the appointment or dismissal of any servant of the crown down to the boy who carried the coal. She was removed to the estate at Ravensmere and required to remain there. She kept her title, because a title is not a key. She kept her rooms because the king would not put his wife into the road, and she kept nothing else whatsoever. He cried when he signed it. Everyone in the long gallery saw it, and nobody has ever pretended otherwise. He was a sick old man who had loved her, and he signed it anyway, and I have come to think that this was the second most difficult thing that anybody did in that whole gray year. She was permitted to speak once, before the instrument was read. She looked down the long gallery at the guardsman standing at the door. They had put him back on a door. He had asked to be put back on a door, and she said, quite clearly, to the whole assembled household, "Whose man are you?" And guardsman Thomas Rennick, who was not supposed to speak, and who had not spoken in the long gallery in 4 years and would not speak in it again, said, "The crown's, madam, same as I was in Frostmonth when you asked me the first time. That is what they mean when they say his defiance left the palace speechless. It was not a thunderclap. It was a man at a door telling a queen that nothing had changed, and that nothing was ever going to change, and that she had spent an entire winter and her rank and her place in the king's house, and quite possibly her soul, discovering a fact about him that had been available for the asking from the very first day, at no charge. Afterwards the king sent for him. I was there. By then I was a clerk in Princess Adela's office, which is a story of its own and not one I mean to tell. Alaric sat in a chair by a window with a rug over his knees, and Rennick stood in front of him with his bearskin under his arm, and the king said, in the tired voice of a man who has learned something very late, "They tell me you refused a sergeancy." "Twice, sir." "Why?" "I'd rather stand at a door, sir." "And if I make you an officer?" "Then I'd be an officer, sir," said Rennick, "and I'd do it as well as I could, but I'd rather stand at a door." The king laughed, a thin, cracked, astonished noise, and then he stopped laughing and he said, "Then ask me for something. I am told the whole realm is watching to see what I give you, and I find I cannot bear to give you nothing." And Thomas Rennick asked for 4 things, and here they are, in the order he asked them. That his sister Nell be restored to her place with her character, and that the woman who put the collar in her basket be found, and that the finding be published because a girl who is cleared quietly is not cleared at all. It was done. It took 9 weeks. Nell Rennick worked 11 years in the palace laundry and then 22 in the wardrobe, and she died a mistress of the linen, and she is buried in the town. That Sergeant Odo Balt be brought back from the wool country and permitted to finish his 32nd year, because a man's pension is one thing, and the completing of a thing is another. It was done. He served 4 more years and stood on the door of the long gallery again and complained about his hip. That the punishment turns on the winter arch be abolished, root and branch, in every company of the household guard, because they are not in the standing orders and never were, and because a discipline that is not written down is not discipline, it is only temper. It was done, and it has never come back, and there are men alive today with their fingers intact who do not know why. And the 4th. The king, I am told, expected the 4th to be for himself, and had already decided to grant it whatever it cost. "Sir," said guardsman Thomas Rennick, "you'll want to apologize to me, and I'd ask you not to me sir." The king said, "I do not understand you." "If you say sorry to me, sir, it's a kindness and it's done, and in 20 years there'll be nothing left of it but a story about a king who was kind to a guardsman." He shifted the bearskin under his arm. "Put it in the book instead, sir. Put it in the standing orders." That an order to a guardsman on his post is not an order without the 2 marks, whoever brings it, whatever's on it, that's in there already, sir, but it's in there small and nobody reads it, and I'd have it in there large. And that the dead book gets read once a year, sir, by a man whose job it is, out loud to the judge advocate. Every refusal in it, every name in it, every pressure that was put on a guardsman in this house that year. He paused. "It saved my neck by an accident, sir. A clerk 400 years dead, and an old man who kept doing his job when nobody was looking. I'd not have the next one saved by an accident." He came to attention. "Don't give me a favor, sir. Give me a precedent. A favor's only good while you're alive." They say King Alaric looked at him for a long time, and then turned his face to the window and then said, "Get out, guardsman, before I disgrace myself." And Thomas Rennick said, "Sir," and got out, and that is the last recorded private conversation between them. The standing orders of the household guard were amended in the autumn of that year. The clause is called the 4th copy, and it is printed on the inside cover now, where every recruit sees it in his first week, and the dead book is read aloud to the judge advocate on the first Tuesday of every wind month, and it has never again been allowed to gather dust, and twice in my lifetime it has broken a man who thought himself untouchable. He would not have a medal. He was given one anyway some years later by King Rowan, who put it into his hand rather than onto his coat, having been warned. He served 26 more years and retired a sergeant. He took the stripes in the end when Balt died, because somebody had to keep the daybook, and he said he supposed he had the handwriting for it. He never rose higher. He never asked to. There is a photograph of him in the guardroom at Harrogate, taken on the last morning of his service, standing at the foot of the Queen's stair in a red tunic with a jaw like a plowshare, looking, as he always looked, at the far end of the corridor, where trouble comes from. Underneath the photograph they have carved the line from the 20th of Frost Month, and every recruit learns it, and I think most of them believe it was said by somebody grand. "You are the king's wife, madam. I am the crown's man. They are not the same door." I was 23 years old when I learned that a trap is built the way a cabinet is built, and by the same sort of hands. I am 68 now. I have been a clerk of the household for 41 years, and I have written a great many things I am not ashamed of, and one book I am, and I have kept that book, and I take it out sometimes. 3 tests, ruled and blotted and numbered in a fair round hand. She wanted a file on him 3 fingers thick. She got one. It is in the signet still, under seal, and I have had cause to fetch it down more than once for young men who want to know what it is they have joined. It is not 3 fingers thick. It is 4 sheets of paper, and it is very thin indeed, and every page of it says the same word, and the word is asterisk, no asterisk.